The Addicks face a season-defining trip to Hillsborough on Saturday afternoon. Here we go. Oh, everybody, welcome into the 61st episode of the From the Firefly podcast. My name is Callum. I will be your host. As always, it's the first time doing just a preview in a very long time. But this game feels so incredibly important that I felt it was good to, necessary, maybe rather than good. Necessary is what I'm looking for. Necessary to chat, to preview, to sort of kind of see how everybody's feeling ahead of it. I'm going to be clenching everything, I think, all the way through, until Saturday at 4:45 or whatever it's going to end up being. By the time the final whistle goes, there's sort of two competing, I guess, narratives, right? You've got the fact that Sheffield Wednesday are a historically bad side. Via in many ways entirely their own fault, but also entirely not their own fault, if that makes sense. With the whole Chancery administration, and all the rest of it. But much like any of those teams that's utterly dreadful, it forces you to bring players through who normally you wouldn't have tried, right? It'd be a bit like, those awful Charlton teams. Does Adam O'Lookman get into a really good Charlton side? Probably not, right? And it sort of allows you to bring through maybe one or two kids a little bit earlier. And in Sheffield Wednesday's case, they're going to Saturday with one of the better keepers in the division in Pierce Charles, and the stats may not necessarily show that. I'm sure he's faced more shots than anybody else. He's had some injuries. He's sort of definitely been overworked and overplayed. But he's an incredibly good goalkeeper, and I think that's a huge part of the reason why, well, Sheffield Wednesday have lost a remarkable number of games for a championship season. They've got one win all season away at Portsmouth. They don't lose by many, right? They don't often get, tonked 4-0, right? Usually they get beaten by the odd goal, maybe by 2. They've got a lot of kids kind of all over the pitch. They've got a couple of the veterans who I imagine are just on contracts they couldn't shift. They've got a manager who, for most of the season, seemingly played a very sort of stodgy style of football that was intended to almost see if they could pull off a miracle. And sort of as the season's gone on, I think he sort of released the handbrake a little bit and gone, well, if we're going to go down, we might as well sort of go down whilst, having a bit of fun. So they were a really, really strange side to talk about because the stats are all absolutely terrible, as you would expect. They haven't won a home game in 336 days. But Hillsborough, historically, for Charlton, has been a house of horrors. And the fact is, over the last 5 games, they've taken as many points as we have. So it's such a difficult sort of game to really chat through. And it's really difficult to know what you should do as a manager, right, in that situation. Do you go for a younger side, and do you go to sort of try and play at pace? Do you really step onto them? Do you try and sort of get in front really early and try and sort of break the spirit? Or do you do what? Or do you sort of bring all your veterans in, right, and sort of try to beat them playing in that way? Do you sort of use that old wily experience to try and get you through a game, right? Sheffield Wednesday for 60 minutes, I think, are going to be really, really difficult to play against because they're going to play with that freedom, right? There's nothing to lose for them. If they lose the ball in their own half, who cares? But these are players. Some of them are on loan from Premier League sides. Some of them are on short-term contracts. Some of them are veterans trying to get another contract, whatever it is. Like, they've got sort of, there's professional pride, but it's almost less professional pride and more sort of like future career opportunities that the Sheffield Wednesday players will be playing for on Saturday afternoon. Everybody plays before us. We'll chat about Blackburn in a second because I think Blackburn could really be in some trouble now after the games on Tuesday. But everybody plays before us. Leicester play Portsmouth. Oxford face a really difficult trip up to Derby to play against they play Ramside, which is 5 points off the playoffs, but Hull haven't won in 3. So there's definitely still an opportunity for Derby potentially to make the playoffs. You got to look at Pompey playing Leicester. If Leicester lose that, you would think mathematically they're basically down at that point as well. But all of these games, Blackburn play on the Friday night, West Brom play before us, so all of these games finish before we play at Hillsborough. If they go our way, it takes a lot of the pressure off, right? If for example, say Leicester beat Pompey, say Blackburn lose to Coventry on Friday, West Brom, I can't remember exactly who West Brom are playing. It will come to me in a second. I looked this up yesterday. And say that I can't remember what the other one is. I think it's actually just those. Yeah, so say those are the results that you get before we kick off at Hillsborough. And suddenly the pressure's slightly off and you can just try and go to win the game, and you would know at that point winning that game means that you're mathematically practically safe. You could go as far as 8 points clear of the bottom 3 with 2 games in hand, right? Because Blackburn played Tuesday, which was the game from match week 45. It was moved because Southampton made the semi-finals of the FA Cup. Obviously, Southampton won that game pretty easily. Blackburn seemingly went and sort of threw the white flag up. Maybe they think there's more of an opportunity for them to get something against Coventry. But if Coventry do us a favour, and Coventry need to win to basically secure, I think a point would secure them promotion. They're basically there already mathematically. But, they need a win to just sort of stay above that the second place sides, because there's so many of them kind of vying for that little those few points and for that sort of first place sort of position. So if Coventry do what they're supposed to do on Friday and they beat Blackburn, tell them we're a point ahead of Blackburn with 2 games in hand, including a trip to Hillsborough and a game at home to an out of form Hull team, right? So the schedule for us is really difficult, minus the fact that Ipswich looked absolutely dreadful at Fratton Park on Tuesday. And I think that McKenna's side sometimes struggle, actually, the way the Nathan Jones teams plays. Same as Mousinho, it's very sort of defensive and stodgy and come break us down. But Ipswich commit men forward. You're almost going to face the opposite problem on Saturday, because Sheffield Wednesday are not going to send 5 players forward, but they will send a few. Right, Jerry Yates is in really good form. Didn't work for him at Luton, but he's gone to Sheffield Wednesday. Had a really good sort of I guess it's a loan spell, but I think Luton want rid of him at the end in the summer. It just hasn't worked out for him. So, he's trying to audition to see if a championship side, maybe a team like Lincoln or somebody come up. Maybe they'd be looking for another striker, a bit of experience. So there are players that are auditioning, but they aren't going to sort of go gung-ho on Saturday. But they will be quite free in the way in which they play. They're helped out, as I say, by the fact they've got an excellent goalkeeper, so that means that they can take a few more risks. He had an amazing game against Leicester, but if you're a Leicester fan, you'll be wondering how we didn't finish any of those chances. Some of them were from 5 or 6 yards, and they smacked it. It's a great save from him, but half an inch to the left or right, and it's a goal. So there are opportunities against Wednesday, as there would be playing any team with -4 points. But it's not going to be easy. And the really key thing here is to deal with, I think, that pressure you're going to face. And I've said it, and I'm sure I've seen some of the comments coming in here, which I'll get to in a moment. I think if you have experience, you're playing Saturday. I don't care if Reece-Burke's hamstring's half ripped off the bone. He's playing, right? I need players on Saturday who've been there and done that, right? We can't rely on having sort of the young kids. We can't rely on academy prospects. We can't rely on League One players. This has to be a game where your veterans know, I need to get 3 points here. Come hell or high water, you get 3 points, and if you get 3 points here and maybe you get a point against Hull, mathematically you're safe. You're not gonna go down on 52, right? You will not go down on 52, you're definitely not going down on 53, right? Where you might struggle is it's possible someone could go down on 50, right? Because Oxford and West Brom have to play Wednesday. But Wednesday have the opportunity here to really, really make the relegation race uncomfortable. The likelihood of Charlton getting relegated is still, tiny. It feels really stressful, and I think part of it is that Nathan Jones is making some of the same mistakes that Lee Bowyer made in this position, right? Falling out with players, not quite having a full rotational squad to play with, for a number of different reasons that aren't always injury related. The system maybe needs a bit of a tweak. It doesn't need maybe a wholesale change, but it needs a tweak. And you're just thinking, look, if things line up in a way that isn't that goes against us, right, we could go down. But again, if you look at the percentage, if you look at the likelihood, it is low, and I think people need to remember that. I've seen a lot of panic all over the place, and that panic's not really helping. And I understand, right? We're going to Hillsborough. Hillsborough's a house of horrors for Charlton. It has been for years, right? Decades even. But this isn't a Sheffield Wednesday who were battling to go up automatically from League One a couple of years ago when we were sort of languishing lower mid-table. This isn't the Sheffield Wednesday from their Premier League pomp or from their great years in the Championship. This is a Sheffield Wednesday on -4 points. And what I would say to anyone panicking is that if we cannot go to a team with -4 points and beat them in a game that we have to win, then we deserve to go down. Right? It is as simple as that. Now, if Coventry do what Coventry can do on Friday, or should do, they could give us an extra backstop, which would be that game in hand over Blackburn. But at the end of the day, we're unlikely to drop any lower than 19th by the end of the weekend. I understand it's the most Charlton thing ever would be for them to not win for 340 days and us to go there and deliver it to them. Well, they had a chance to get something at the Valley and they didn't. And actually, the second half, they played better than us in that game. But a lot of those players that played well are gone after January, right? Like, almost anyone of value from Sheffield Wednesday. If Pierce Charles hadn't been injured, he would have been sold in January. Right? They've got, is it Brown, the young centre-back, who's been out for most of the season? That's another young player that would have gone if he'd been fit, almost certainly, right? So there's a lot of one-year options and different things they can trigger to sort of maybe try and keep something somewhat competitive. But this is a team that's looking at what they need to do to be somewhat competitive, even if they get another points deduction in League One. Right? It might be a football club that's about to have to restart in League Two. Right? This is not a game where we should. This is a Hillsborough that's going to be a quarter full. Right? The consortium thing's not. My big sort of joke about it was that they'll have their ownership situations also before we go there and they'll have a full Hillsborough. They're not going to have a full Hillsborough. It's going to be 3/4 empty. And, fair play to the quarter of that ground in terms of capacity that's still going. Anyone that gone to every single Sheffield Wednesday away game this year should get themselves a free season ticket next year at minimum by whoever buys that football club, because fair play to every single one of them. Because that is dedication that is beyond the pale. And I say that as someone that myself basically goes every single game home and away. And I know how difficult it is even when you're reasonably competitive. But it's so important that you remember as a fan the team that you're playing, right? You are playing a team that is historically awful, right? Even without the points deduction, because so many players had to be sold or left. So we need to remember that this is not some big scary opposition we're playing. This is the worst team in the division, right? And I think that in many ways should reset. It's not to be complacent. It's not to say that we're going to go there and beat them 5-0. I've said earlier in the pod that they don't often lose games by more than 1 or 2 goals, right? It's going to be difficult to beat that goalkeeper. It's going to be difficult to get around those centre-backs. But we also have to be really realistic in the way in which we're talking about as fans what the setup should be. A 4-3-3 with a front three, as I've seen a couple of people talk about, of Fevrier, TC, and Charlie Callum will get absolutely nowhere. You need height, You need size. You need the ability to bother those centre backs running in behind. Yes. So anyone saying, "Oh, we're just going to drop Tyrese Campbell and it's all going to be absolutely fine," that's not the answer either. I'm not against a sort of shift in formation, but I wouldn't shift system. And I think those are two very different things. Maybe you can play four at the back, but it would be Bell as a left back. It would not be. It would not be sort of Bell at left centre back in a four. You'd have to almost certainly bring Reece Burke in, so you would play Lloyd Jones with Reece Burke in a back four, with Bell at left back and probably Kane Ramsey at right back. I think the midfield, you're probably Joe Rankin must be playing in this game. We don't know about Conor Cody at the moment. If he's fit, I would play him. He can actually play the ball through the lines, which is something that almost none of our other midfielders can do. If I see Greg Docherty and Carl Coventry both together on that starting lineup, I might lose my mind, because this is not a game for that. But it's also not a game with which to throw 20 men forward, because if you don't treat them with respect, if you don't treat them as a side that they can hurt you, they will hit you on the counter, and we have been terrible against the counter lately, right? I don't understand what Greg Docherty was doing on Saturday for the second goal, stepping up. Well, rewatching it back, he's going absolutely nowhere. I saw someone talking about starting Ibby Fuller. Like, no. This isn't a game for that. This isn't a game to mess around with and try stuff out. We don't have the ability to do that yet, right? I would much rather play an experimental side against Ipswich, get beaten 4-0 and make sure Millwall don't finish second, knowing that I'm practically safe, than I would do some weird experiment away at Hillsborough and get beaten 1-0 by doing it. That doesn't mean you have to play stodgy football. It means you can push. If you're playing the three back, you can push the wing backs high. You can overlap with Luke Chambers. You can allow the midfielder to step out and play almost on the right wing. So you can play Rankin Costello almost stepped out and leave one holder in the middle there. I would genuinely think about dropping Sonny Carey, but I would also struggle to do it. I think that when you're the top scorer at a club in a game like this is where you need your scorers playing. I think it makes the same sense is why Lyndon Dykes should be playing in this game. Charlie Callum should be coming off the bench, where he's been far more effective. He scored most of his goals coming off the bench, right? But you need to think about a game like this as a fan rationally, right? We can't sit here and say, "Oh, all my favourites need to come into this game." You have to see who works and who fits. A tiny front three with no height and no physicality will do absolutely nothing against this Wednesday side. Coventry improved when they brought Ellis Sims on because he added that physicality and those centre-backs didn't want to deal with it. That's what you need to be doing, right? I don't mind starting Matty Godden next to Lyndon Dykes, right? I don't mind, trying something slightly different, right? Even if you want to take the pace element out of it and say, actually, I'm going to focus on trying to sort of beat you sort of back to goal, right? Or front to goal. And maybe not in behind, but I think a Godden is very useful in a game like this because he can make the smart run. This is more of a League One quality backline, right? It's not a backline that's got tons and tons and tons of championship experience. I don't think Deshaun Bernard is fit. Thank God for that. So I think that, you're not dealing with the most impressive centre-backs in the world. You are dealing with a very impressive goalkeeper who will not be at Sheffield Wednesday in about 2 months' time. But you need to focus on trying to do it's a really good comp, actually. A really good comp would be Wigan when we played them at home in League One. A very, very good goalkeeper in Sam Tickle, a defence that was slow, but it was a decent defensive record they had, but they had nothing going forward. But they had some young players who were a little bit exciting on the ball. That's the sort of Luke Chambers is actually in that team, but that's the sort of side that you're playing on Saturday is sort of the Championship's version of that, except for really their sort of League One quality in a lot of places on the pitch. But whatever you do, you have to treat them with respect. You have to go into that game as if you're playing anybody else. What the number of points they're on, what ground they play in, because Hillsborough is falling apart in many ways. It's a club that just hasn't been invested in, right? But you have to focus on the fact that it's just another championship game. And if you approach it like that, you should be able to beat Sheffield Wednesday. But what I would say to fans, and I'll go take some comments in a minute, is we need to calm down slightly. I get it. We're all stressed. I get it. We're all worried, right? We're all worried, right? I saw, if you saw Louis Mendes over the weekend, he looked miserable, right? I was miserable. I was on cloud 15 in terms of being annoyed when I did my pod on Sunday morning. I calmed down a little bit for the Chronicles, but I was still really upset. Right, I'm still upset by Saturday. I think the manager got it horribly wrong. I think the last month has been a complete disaster managerially, right, for this football club. But in the same way, I also don't want to look at it and sort of go, going into this game thinking like, oh, we're gonna lose. It doesn't help you, and especially if you're gonna be in that away end on Saturday. And you have your right, you paid for your ticket, you have the right to express yourself however you want. But I would suggest if you're in that away end on Saturday, you need to bring some positive vibes. You need to bring we're gonna, you might be clenching everything, but you can smile. Right? And that's what we need to do. Is we need to. It's not going to be a game you're going to go and beat them 5-0. Right? I'd love it to be a repeat of Northampton. That was the worst I felt coming out of the Valley since that Crawley home game, that Preston North End game. Right? What do we follow that up with a 5-0 win at Northampton? Right? I'd love it. I don't think it's going to happen because I think people don't realise that, yes, they're bottom of the Championship. Yes, they're on negative points. Yes, they've won one game all season. But it's not a team of complete mugs. They are full-time professionals, and there's a lot of young kids with quite a bit of talent in that Wednesday side. So don't underestimate them, but don't overestimate them. And don't take historical trends from 2007 and try to apply them to 2026. Right? This isn't even the Wednesday team of last year that finished 14th. This is a historically awful Championship side. Right? So I'm going to take some comments now, but I hope that sort of lays out where I would go. I think if we're going to do teams, Manuel and me in goal, because I think Kaminsky's time at Charlton is over. Whether I agree with it or not, I think that's what's going to happen. I would actually stick in the 3 to start, and then I would change it if needed. I would go Jones, Bell, and I would probably, if he's fit, I would think about bringing Burke in, but I think he'll go Ramsey. Right wing back, if Harry Clark is fit, I think he comes back in, much like Fevrier. I think at left wing back, Luke Chambers plays there as well. Central midfield, I would bring Connor Cody in. I think I'd play JRC in front of him, and I would play probably Sonny Carey. At the moment, I would hook Sonny Carey after an hour if he's looked the way he has lately, probably for a Harvey Nibbs type. If he brings on Luke Berry, I might just cry. And then up front, I would probably go Lyndon Dykes and Matty Godden. But if he goes Lyndon Dykes and Tyrese Campbell, I'm not going to cry about it the way that some people will. Right. There we go. That's my preview of Sheffield Wednesday. Let's have a chat to a couple of the comments. Thank you for joining me on a random Wednesday night. I hope that my points of I hope maybe I brought you a little bit of hope and calm. Or if you're listening to this on the train up, that maybe gives you just a little bit of confidence and a little bit of context into what we should be looking at. I've got Robert in here. Hello, good evening. He's saying we feel we should definitely bring Cody back and Clark if he's fit. Yeah, I agree with you, Philly. So continue with JRC and Dykes and Godden up front, Campbell on the bench. Personally, I would do that. I think that would make sense. If he doesn't do it, I'm not going to cry, and I think that's kind of where I stay with it. I understand if he wants the pace up front, because you kind of want to be able to stretch them a little bit. They're going to sit very, very deep, so I don't think the pace is really going to help you a lot of the game. So I think in Matty Godden to kind of do what he did in League One, which is just find those little pockets of space. However, one could argue that Tyrese Campbell at times in League One found lots of little pockets, especially if they leave space in their back 3 down the sides. David, hello, nice to see you again. Saying good afternoon. Sure, this is now the time to play your more established senior pros at this game. Hillsborough is vital to the Addicks remaining in the Championship, but I'm no Nathan Jones. I think most of us would probably err towards that. As I say, I have seen some people saying Chuck Fuller in, Chuck, whoever in. It's not a game for players like that. This is a game for your established veterans, for me. It'd be interesting to see if other people agree or not. I think it's time to rest Sonny Carey and give JRC a good run in the team. Yeah, I mean, they play slightly different positions. I think that I would probably drop Doc and Cov out. I can understand if he wants to keep his captain in, but I don't again think this is a game where you're going to be breaking up patterns of play. It's a game where you're going to be on the ball a lot, and you're going to have someone who can take the ball down in midfield, and that's just not Greg Docherty's game. Hello, Sam. How you doing, my man? Hope all is okay with you. Not sure how it feels normally. I'm looking forward to a Saturday, but everything riding on it definitely does. Doesn't feel exciting. It works. So maybe it doesn't feel exciting. The wrong word, Sam. It's incredibly stressful. I will say that. it shouldn't be against a team with -4 points, should it really? Um, but it's part of it. I think is the Hillsborough effect. It's just that our record at Hillsborough is so incredibly bad. That I remember, was it Corey Blackett-Taylor missed an open goal there, and we lost 1-0. Was it Tyree Backinson who scored a header or something in that game? And Thomas Sangop was about 3 rows in front of us. It was all a bit bizarre. It's a reduced capacity away in due as well due to the safety precautions, so that's great. That tells you that Hillsborough's in great nick at the moment. Samsung, I agree with you, Rob. Squad change, we need to go and smash it. I think so. I mean, again, I'd be very, very careful using words like smash because it can be really, really difficult to do it in a game like this. Right? This is a game that you would quite happily take a 1-0 win off of Will Mannion's backside. Right? Very, very happily take that. I take that most weeks a lot, to be totally honest with you, but absolutely you would take anything that involves you having one more goal on Wednesday. I don't think it's going to be, you rock up there and you beat them 5-0. I just don't think that it's likely. I'll come back to this next week and I'll see if I'll come back to this at 5 o'clock on Saturday and see if I was right or not. So everyone noticed less social media posts this week. This is true. We still haven't been told when the Swansea tickets are coming out, which is a little wild. I'm in tier 1, so I'm all right. But if you're someone in like tiers 4, 5, 6, you don't know if you're gonna get tickets for Swansea. We don't know if it's an important game or not, and it's a bit of a mess. Yeah, whatever way you slice it, season-defining Saturday losing doesn't frankly bear thinking about. It doesn't. As I say, there is a slight guess out of jail free card, which is if Coventry lose to Blackburn. Or so if Coventry beat Blackburn. There's definitely there's definitely a world in which weirdly you come out of it and you're actually still 5 points ahead of the relegation zone or whatever it is. I just don't want to think about it that way. I think that you'll get some confidence of the team around you drop points. I think extra pressure happens if the teams around you sort of gain. I'll say I'm not overlooking forward to the game, Sam, again. So I think I can tell you the stress, Sam. The silver lining is that we're better away than home have been for a while. Maybe the pressure off somewhat. I just get the feeling Jones has lost ideas. I don't think he's ever been a manager known for his attacking tactical nous. His Luton teams, basically, when Nathan Jones talks about athleticism and talks about being front-footed, that sort of thing is about trying to create mistakes. You don't need to be doing sort of attacking triangles in the opposition half. His Luton teams were very, very good at picking up 1-0s at places that were tricky. We were good at beating teams by 1 goal in League One. West Brom are away to Preston North End. That's what I was thinking. We'll have to see. There's a possible points deduction for West Brom as well, which I think could make things very, very interesting. If we start on a technicality, I'll take staying up on a technicality. But look, I think if we finish sort of 1 or 2 points ahead of the relegation zone, you are going to have to ask some questions about what's happening at the end of this season. I think you're going to have to anyway. You go win the next 2 and all of a sudden you're safe and everything's hunky-dory. But, I still think an autopsy is going to be necessary for some of the games this season. I don't know if being aware the pressure is off, Charlie. I think in this particular game, this may be true, only because if we were playing them at home, we'd be expected to dominate the ball and dominate them, and there's 20,000 people groaning. I think away from home, because Hillsborough is such a house of horrors, a lot of Charlton fans are thinking about Hillsborough rather than thinking about the fact that we're playing Sheffield Wednesday, if that makes sense. So I don't think it's a way in that's necessarily going to be toxic. I think if we concede early, much like Leicester did there, we could be in real trouble. That's another thing to note, actually. Whilst we're on the topic, don't give away stupid corners. Teams like this love to feast on it. Jerry Yates is very, very good in the air, and I imagine he will probably try to target either Kane Ramsey or Amari Bell on corners like that. If you do give up a corner, Lloyd Jones needs to be sticking himself, for me, onto Yates. Again, this is why I probably would err towards, if he's fit, personally, I would err towards, seeing if you can get another Sheffield game out of Reece Burke, because I think that you might want the height. Just to kind of help mitigate losing Jones to marking Yates instead of marking the centre of the goal. Marking the centre of the box. I think that actually having another really tall centre back in there probably helps, because I think probably lately we've been seeing maybe where teams have been sort of either playing the ball sort of when they cross it, they're either crossing it to the first man, so they're crossing it to the guy that Kane Ramsey's marking or the guy that Amari Bell's marking. And so they're trying to get over Lloyd Jones instead of trying to put it in front of where Lloyd Jones would be, and I think that's causing us some problems at the moment. So that's something to watch for. Dykes and Godden for Andrew Roberts. Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I would do. I think you need the smart movement. I don't think that, and I don't think the pace in a game like this isn't necessarily massively important, although they do have pace down the side, so you do need to watch in terms of turning the ball over. We failed to beat Bristol City, who had a makeshift centre back. Doesn't make any difference who we face. No. I mean, I don't think there's a big difference between Bristol City playing a right back at centre back and what's happening at Sheffield Wednesday, right? But half that team is children. Like Sheffield Wednesday for an hour, I think are going to be. I've just seen Paul Bowen's comment about Berry. I hate you. No, I'm just kidding. But they're very, very different, right? Like these, a lot of these are children, right? And they are not of the standard. Even if you've watched games where they've gotten draws out of it, teams have had shot after shot after shot. I know what my worry is more our inability to finish than it is our ability to create chances against a team like this. I know people point at Oxford, but I can tell you what, Brown would start for probably about 10 sides in the Championship. I don't think any of those Sheffield Wednesday centre-backs start for any of them. And that's the difference, right? Is that even teams that are bad, quote unquote, have very good players. Sheffield Wednesday have a couple. Again, the goalkeeper's the big one, but Jerry Yates up front had a very good run out. They've got a couple. Is it Nagala, the kid, on the wing, is a decent player. And they play with a lot of pride, right? And fair play to is it Pedersen? I always get it wrong with them, but fair play to him. He's created a culture where they have pride, and they're not a good footballing side by any stretch, but they're proud to play for Sheffield Wednesday, and I think that that makes a team difficult to play against because they don't want to get embarrassed 5 or 6. No, they haven't thrown the towel in. They don't sort of mop around like players at Leicester do, despite being paid 5 times the amount, right? So that I think is the difference. It's, as much as I hate on this podcast talking about things like players caring, because I just don't think that it's particularly analytical. I think in this particular instance, I think for Sheffield Wednesday, when we talk about Sheffield Wednesday, that stuff really does matter, right? It really matters, and so that's why you just can't underestimate it. But they're not what Bristol City are in terms of talent, right? They don't have an out ball, right? It's not just the player playing centre back, so you can pass it to. Right? Look at the difference of the fullbacks for Bristol City compared to the midfielders for Bristol. Imagine Sheffield Wednesday, the Randall in the middle, right? This is a team whose best player is Barry Bannon. He's on the bench for Millwall. That sort of tells you kind of where where they are at the moment. I'm very happy Bannon is not there anymore because I don't want to think about him scoring the goal that would win the game. So. You have to be careful, but again, I think a lot of people have fallen back into that trap of being scared of scared of it. There's nothing to be scared of with Sheffield Wednesday. They are on -4 points for a reason, right? They had a -21 points deduction, was it? I don't think it was that. Was it -20? It was something like that. But they still haven't gotten themselves back into positive territory. That's how bad it is. Yes, they picked up a couple of points, but they're playing a Leicester team who are just in a complete and utter mess and should have actually won the game. And they played against the Coventry side. They just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net, and that happens sometimes. We just have to make sure if we get an opportunity to bury it and put as close to the corner as possible so that Charles doesn't make a wonder save. If we managed that, we've been super lucky with the brilliant start we had along with Wednesday and Leicester's points deduction. Look, Wednesday's part of it. I think people talk about, yes, Wednesday have taken a spot, but what they've also done is they've massively inflated the number of points that we all have. What hasn't helped us as well is there's not been a dominant team in that top bracket. Coventry are nowhere near as what they're on 84. What did Leeds finish on or Burnley finish on last year? It was much higher than that. I think Sheffield United finished 3rd and they were close to 100 points. So that top bit's nowhere near as dominant. So that's part of it. But also like the I think the bottom being so bad has actually helped inflate the number of points that you need. You're actually going to need close to 52. If you go 52 points in the championship season, you're going to stay up basically every year. I think there was 2 years where 56 and 54 put a team down, but 56 was back in the early 80s or something. And I think was that the year Rotherham got the docked some crazy amount of points. I think it may have been, but like. So it inflates actually the number of points that you need. The middle has actually, I think, been better than it is most seasons. So it's just a lot of sort of there's a lot of different mathematical permutations. So I don't think you can just sort of sit there and say, "Oh, it's luck. We started well. That's what's happened." We've sort of we did start well. That happens often with teams that come up via the playoffs because you have the momentum. It's like, for example, if Luton at the moment, because Luton could at the moment could potentially finish sixth and maybe go up via the playoffs in League One, right? I would not want to play them at Kenilworth Road as an opening game, for exactly that reason, because they will have that sort of that momentum, right? So that momentum dies normally because of injuries. That's what happened with us. We got injuries everywhere. It wasn't that I formed it. We got injuries, right? We lost George Edwards and we lost Murray Bell. We didn't make, that sort of lack of depth really harms teams who come up that way. Whereas teams like Wrexham and Birmingham started a lot slower than us, but that's because that momentum was sort of lost sort of over the summer, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily luck. It's there's been lucky parts to this season for teams on the bottom and unlucky bits to it. It's probably been easier to beat the better sides, and most teams have beaten one of the better sides. We beat a couple. Portsmouth have beaten a couple now. I think Oxford have beaten one or two. So there is that part of it, but there's also the bottom is better because of that. So I've just the math. It doesn't suggest we've been lucky. We've actually been a decent side. It's just over the last 6 weeks, the manager's made decisions that have been utterly baffling. And I think we've taken our foot off the gas far too early. Sabbath veterans like Berry, absolutely not. Leave them back in South London. Sam saying hell no, Paul. Yeah, leave them in South London. Starting to feel better, but Berry was mentioned. Yeah, leave him in South London. Actually, you know what? Bring him with you. I would probably take Fuller off the bench because you never know when you might need a Berry 90th minute winner, and it does happen every once in a while. Mike Nathan Joe surprises and being experienced with Kaminsky. No, Kaminsky's done as a Charlton player from all I've heard. He's done. He'll be leaving in the summer. Whether you think that's the right thing or the wrong thing, I think I made it very clear how I feel about it on the pod. But it is what it is. Yeah, rumors that both have fallen out. Yeah, they're falling out, and suppose that was reasonably spectacular. So that's unlikely to. My thing about the warm up, I think, ended up actually being just I analysed it correctly. All right. Well, I'm going to be on the Chronicles. I'll be hosting this evening, so feel free to come join us. At 8:00, we'll get sort of Paul Davenport and Kieran's perspective. But hopefully now we can all sort of start thinking of playing Sheffield Wednesday the team, but not Sheffield Wednesday, not Sheffield Hillsborough the place. If you're going up, come say hello if you're there. If not, I'll be back on Sunday evening to hopefully review the game that basically keeps us safe. But keep everything crossed, everything clenched, and then hopefully 4:45 on Saturday will be a big, massive sigh of relief. All right. Bye for now. Thanks, everybody.